If you don't find a bigger place, I'm leaving. Chloe's voice was calm to calm, the kind of calm that comes right before something breaks. It was noon, sunlight spilling through the blinds, cutting sharp lines across the kitchen floor. I set my coffee mug down and looked at her. She was standing by the window, arms crossed, wearing that same grey sweater she loved so much, her hair slightly messy from the morning. "This apartment is too small for both of us," she continued. "I can't live like this anymore, Ethan." I didn't say anything. We'd been together 8 months, and this was the first time I realized that love could sound like a business negotiation. The apartment wasn't much, just 500 square feet on the east side of Seattle, with creaky floors and a view of the alleyway. But it was mine. I'd saved for 3 years to buy it. It was quiet, close to work, and most importantly, it felt like me. There was a corner desk by the window where I wrote every night, a small coffee table that had seen too many late conversations, and a worn leather couch that still smelled faintly of rain. When Chloe first came over, she said she liked how simple everything was. She liked the way I made coffee, strong, black, no sugar. She liked how the morning light hit the walls, how the air smelled faintly of pine from the park nearby. She said it felt peaceful. Funny thing about peace, people say they want it, until it starts to feel too quiet. Over time, Chloe's weekends here turned into full weeks. Her clothes filled half my closet. Her skincare bottles lined the bathroom sink. My desk, the one spot that used to feel like mine, got crowded with scented candles and chargers and her half-read books. The place started to change, subtly at first. A new rug, a different set of curtains, a plant in the corner, and me, I began shrinking into the background of my own home. "We can't keep living like this," she said again, her voice sharper now. "It's too cramped, Ethan. I need space." Space. The word hung between us like a dare. I looked around the apartment, the tiny kitchen, the bookshelf I'd built from scratch, the scuffed wooden floor. Every inch of this place had a memory. Every corner held a piece of the person I used to be before us. "Maybe you're right," I said finally. "Maybe it's time to move." Chloe's eyes softened, a small smile tugging at her lips. "I knew you'd understand. I actually found a few listings. There's one downtown, big windows, open kitchen, a view of the lake. We could go see it tomorrow." I nodded slowly. "Sure," I said. "Tomorrow." But even as I said it, I already knew the move I was planning had nothing to do with a new apartment. She thought she'd won the argument, that she'd convinced me. But what she didn't realize was that something inside me had already packed its bags a long time ago. Outside, the sound of rain began tapping softly against the window, and for the first time in months, the apartment didn't feel small. It just felt ... empty. We met at a small coffee shop near the park, a quiet place where I usually went to write, and where she liked to sit with a thick novel. The first time I saw Chloe, I remember her smile, calm, quiet, as if she was keeping a secret that made her happy. She ordered a cappuccino, set her book down, and accidentally dropped a page. I picked it up for her. That small gesture turned into a conversation about a line from the book, then about a song, and somehow, that afternoon stretched a little longer than it should have. In the beginning, everything was easy. We took long walks by the lake, talked about dreams and fears. Chloe had a laugh that made me feel young again. She told me about her family, her travels, her job at a design studio. I told her about the nights I stayed up writing scripts, the failures, the few small wins. We fit together like two puzzle pieces that had been waiting to meet. It was the little things that made me fall for her. She learned how to make coffee the way I liked it. I spent an afternoon helping her fix a leaning bookshelf. She hummed when she washed the dishes. I'd tease her just to make her laugh. Sometimes we'd lie on the floor and watch an old movie, not talking, just breathing in the same rhythm. I loved Chloe because she listened, not politely, but deeply. When I talked about a character I was writing, she'd rest her hand on mine and ask questions that made me open up more than I expected. With her, I felt understood, and that's rare, but slowly, the things that once felt like connection began to feel like routine. Chloe started showing up in more of my plans. She wanted to go grocery shopping together, wanted to choose my lamps, wanted to pick the color of the curtains. At first, I liked it. Who wouldn't want the person they love to care about their life? But soon, that care began to take up space. Decisions became discussions. Discussions became permissions. And sometimes, I felt like I had to ask before doing something in my own home. There were small moments when something inside me shifted, like the time she talked about her ex, how he never tried anything new. She said it casually, but I heard the weight beneath it, a silent list of things her partner should be, and I started to wonder if I was quietly being measured against that list when she suggested we try living together. She said it lightly, as if it was the next natural step. I said yes, thinking it was a sign of trust. But a few weeks later, as her things began filling every empty space, I realized it wasn't a gift, it was an occupation. Slow, soft, but complete. Sometimes I asked myself, when did we stop listening and start measuring? When did love turn into a checklist of square footage and future plans? I didn't have an answer. Only a quiet sense that our love had started to shrink inside walls that were once enough for both of us. There were nights I saw her sitting on the couch, phone in hand, smiling at messages I wasn't part of. Once or twice, I caught a name, Cameron. The name alone didn't hurt. What hurt was the small, invisible distance forming between us. Filled with things I no longer recognized, those early days taught me something. Love begins when someone truly sees you, but to last you have to fight to stay seen. I didn't know how to fight for that, not yet. I only knew that when she finally said, "If you don't find a bigger place, I'll leave." It wasn't a sudden storm. It was the quiet conclusion of something that had been unraveling for months. I remember one afternoon on a bridge, when Chloe held my hand and whispered, "I want a place for us." I smiled then, imagining a future we'd build together. Now, when she says she needs more space, I realize that future no longer means us sitting side by side. It means two roads slowly parting in different directions. I looked down at my hands, rough, small calluses from long nights of work, and wondered if holding on was still love, or just fear of letting go. That night, it started like any other conversation. We were having dinner when Chloe brought up the apartment again. She talked about how cramped she felt, about the places she'd been looking at online, the ones with wide balconies, natural light, and open kitchens. She described one in detail. "There's this one in Belltown, 2 bedrooms, big windows, open layout, and you can see the lake from the balcony. I can already imagine it, you know. Our table, friends coming over. You'd love it." Her voice wasn't pleading. It was the kind of tone people use when they've already made up their mind. I just sat there, listening. Every word she said felt like another thread wrapping around me, pulling tighter. If it were a few months earlier, maybe I would have argued, tried to explain, reason, find some middle ground. But this time, I just didn't have it in me anymore. I wasn't angry, just tired, and strangely calm. Then she stopped talking and looked straight at me. "You have to decide, Ethan," she said. "If you don't move, I will. I can't wait any longer." Her words were quiet but sharp. No shouting, no drama, just clear and cold, like someone closing a deal. One option, one deadline. I looked into her eyes. There wasn't fear or hesitation there, only determination. And in that moment, I could picture the future she was already building in her head. A new apartment, bigger, brighter, perfectly arranged. And maybe, somewhere in that picture, there was no room left for me. I said quietly, "If that's what you need, then do it." She froze. Her face shifted, surprise, then anger, then a hint of sadness. "You can't just say that," she whispered. "You can't just walk away," but I could. And I had already decided to. After that night, I stopped trying to talk things out. I went back to old habits, sitting at my desk, staring at the computer, but this time not for work. I started searching for apartments, scrolling through listings, checking prices, reading every line of the contracts. No sublet, single occupancy preferred. I wasn't looking for our new place anymore. I was looking for mine. I found a small studio in Capitol Hill, about 400 square feet, a big window overlooking the street, sunlight hitting the corner where a desk would fit perfectly. Simple, quiet, enough for one person. I signed the lease that same day. No hesitation. I booked a moving service for Tuesday. Then I made a list of what to take: my desk, my computer, my books, the old leather chair. Everything else, her clothes, her shoes, her lotions, I left as they were. I wrote a short note and placed it on the kitchen counter. "You said you needed more space. I decided to find mine. You can stay until the end of the month. I wish you all the best." The night before the move, I stayed up late packing. Outside, it was raining, soft, steady. I didn't feel sad or relieved, just quiet. It felt like that heavy silence that fills a room right before you turn off the lights. I thought of Chloe's smile, how she believed we'd go see that big apartment together. And I thought about myself, someone who finally learned that silence could be its own kind of answer. The movers arrived at 9 the next morning. I told them simply, "Only these boxes." They worked fast. I stood there watching as each piece of my life left through the door, one by one, like memories quietly being carried away. When it was done, I left the keys on the counter, placed the note beside them, and closed the door behind me. Before leaving, I looked around the apartment one last time. The same walls, the same light filtering through the curtains, yet everything felt different. This place used to be mine. Now it just looked like an empty shell waiting for someone else to fill it. When the truck pulled away, I texted Chloe, "I've moved out. Let me know when you want to pick up your things." Then I turned off my phone. Standing in the lobby of the new building, I looked out at the street. The rain hadn't stopped. It didn't feel like winning or losing, just quiet. I knew something had ended, but something else was finally beginning. And in the middle of the rain, I realized sometimes the space you need isn't measured in square feet. It's the kind of space where you can finally breathe on your own. The next morning, I was setting up my desk in the new studio when my phone started buzzing non-stop. Several missed calls, all unknown numbers, and then a long text from Chloe. What did you do? The apartment's empty. My stuff's gone. You can't just do this to me. My chest tightened. I sighed and looked out the window. Rain was still falling softly. I knew she'd react, but I didn't expect it to happen this fast. Or this hard. I texted back briefly, "You can come pick up your things. I left everything you had there. Let's talk later, okay?" About an hour later, the front desk called. "There's a woman here, asking for you. Says she's your girlfriend." When I came down, I saw Chloe standing in the lobby, hair messy, face flushed, eyes red from crying, clutching a few paper bags. Her expression was chaos, hurt, anger, disbelief. The moment she saw me, she blurted out, "What the hell, Ethan? You can't do this." I kept my voice calm. "Chloe, your things are still there. You can go get them. Everything you left is still in the old place." But she wasn't listening. She stormed closer, her voice breaking. "My stuff's gone. The TV, the table, where are they? You took everything, didn't you? You took my things." I froze, not because of guilt, but because of how foreign she suddenly felt. Someone I once trusted now, looking at me like I'd betrayed her. "Chloe," I said slowly, "you never signed the lease. You knew that? I took what was mine. What's yours is still there." She turned to the security guard, as if hoping for backup. He hesitated, then said gently, "Ma'am, the lease is under his name. If there's an issue, you'll have to contact the landlord." Chloe's voice cracked into a sob. "You're throwing me out. You can't just throw me out." A few minutes later, she called some friends. 2 of them showed up, standing beside her like silent witnesses. One of them looked at me with confusion. "She said you left her with nothing, that she has nowhere to go." I stayed quiet, then said, "She lived there without a lease. She knows that." Chloe shot back, "You didn't even tell me. You planned this. You just wanted to get rid of me." Her words hit like small, sharp stones. I remembered the nights she stayed over, her clothes hanging in my closet, her towel draped over my chair. Now, all of that was evidence, not of love, but of invasion. One of her friends raised their voice. "We'll contact the landlord. You can't just evict her like this." I met his eyes. I paid rent through the end of the month. I left her belongings untouched. I didn't evict anyone. Chloe stepped closer, her hand brushing against the coat, still hanging on the rack, the one that still smelled faintly of her perfume. She clutched it tight, then looked at me and said quietly, almost trembling, "You planned everything, didn't you? You had this ready." I shook my head. "No, Chloe. I just planned for myself. You wanted space. I gave you space, and I chose mine." For a moment, she just stared at me, her eyes searching for something that wasn't there anymore. Then she turned around, walked down the steps, called an Uber, and left a few small bags behind. Before she got into the car, she looked back and said one last thing, soft but sharp, "You'll regret this." After that, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Dozens of texts, angry messages, calls from unknown numbers, even one saying they'd call the police. I replied to a few, short and calm. "Your stuff's there. Take it when you're ready." That afternoon, I got a call from her mother. Her voice was polite but tired. My daughter told me what happened. She's hurt, you know. Can you help her get her things? I explained everything, that I'd left all her belongings, paid rent till month's end, and that she could talk to the landlord if needed. There was a pause. Then she sighed. I understand, she said quietly. I'll take care of it. The rest of the day passed in fragments, a few tense calls, a few angry messages, and a lot of silence. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I just realized how decisions never happen in a vacuum. They spill out, touching everyone around them. That night, I sat alone in my new apartment. The lamp cast a warm glow on the walls. I scrolled through old messages, pictures of us at the lake, crossing the bridge, laughing over coffee. They used to make me smile. Now they just felt like souvenirs from another life. I asked myself if I'd done the wrong thing. Maybe, but under all that guilt, there was something else, a quiet understanding that I had finally drawn a line, and this time I'd chosen to stand on my side of it. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady, rhythmic, like a reminder that everything eventually settles, even the storms we start ourselves. From that day on, my phone hardly stopped ringing. Messages from mutual friends, a few calls from people who knew Chloe, even an email from the landlord confirming he had seen her. Everything came like a small wave, not loud, but repeating enough to wear my mind out. Chloe no longer texted me directly. She left a few lines on social media, vague posts about betrayal, a cold man, a house left empty without explanation. I read them, then scrolled past. Not angry, not defensive. I understood everyone has their own way of healing, and perhaps hers was to tell the story the way she wanted to believe it. I went to work as usual, but everything slowed down. Mornings still began with coffee, but the familiar scent of her perfume no longer lingered in the air. No one asked, "Do you want more sugar?" or placed the cup on my desk with a smile. The small studio was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking. At first I felt relieved. Later it was just emptiness. At night I often played soft jazz in the room, just to fill the silence. Sometimes I opened the window, looking out at the damp streets under Seattle rain, car lights reflecting like streaks of memory. I wondered if she was still in this city, or if she had moved somewhere else, somewhere bright, spacious, and with more room, as she used to dream. One afternoon, I met Jake again, a mutual friend of ours. He was silent for a while, then asked, "You okay?" I smiled. "Better than I thought." He nodded, then said quietly, "Chloe's sad. But I get you. Maybe this is as far as you two could go." I just nodded. Nothing more needed to be said. Some relationships don't end with a fight. They fade through silence, until neither side can find a reason to stay. In the days that followed, I started writing again. Not to tell our story, but to understand myself. I wrote about the feeling of being cornered, about how people often choose silence over arguments, about the limits we only recognize after crossing them. I realized some people come to teach us how to love, and some come to teach us how to leave. Chloe belonged to the latter. One Sunday morning, I woke early, brewed coffee, and opened the window. The first sunlight of the new month spilled across my desk. The small room was the same, but something had changed. Not sadness, but the calm after everything had settled. I picked up my phone, stared at her name in my contacts for a long time, then deleted it. Not because I wanted to forget, but because there was no need to hold on anymore. When the screen turned blank, I smiled. A tired but genuine smile. That noon, I went out and stopped by an old bookstore near Capitol Hill. The elderly shopkeeper said, "You always buy books about beginnings," I replied. "Maybe because I'm still learning how to begin." She smiled, eyes gentle. "Then you're on the right path." By afternoon, the sky cleared. I sat at a cafe on the second floor, watching people pass by, listening to the sound of the streetcar. Among all those sounds, for the first time, I felt truly at peace. No anger, no regret, only one clear feeling: freedom. I understood. In the end, more space wasn't about room for another table, another chair, or another person. It was space to breathe, to be myself, without needing to prove anything. And in that moment, I knew I had returned to life. Quietly, without regret. Just a man learning to live again, day by day, breath by breath. Time passed, not fiercely, not loudly, but quietly, like morning breath. The following weeks turned into a series of identical mornings, brewing strong coffee, opening my laptop, sitting down and starting to write. At first, the pages were just a way to fill the emptiness. Gradually, they became the place where I found my voice again. I wrote about small things, a blink when it rained, the sound of footsteps on the stairs, the scent of old books in the Capitol Hill bookstore. I wrote about the sadness that once dragged me down, not to pity myself, but to analyze, to understand. Words helped me untie the knots in my heart. One by one, work stayed the same. The emails, the meetings, but between those tasks, I began to find quiet moments for myself. I stopped seeking validation from others. Instead, I learned to refine my morning routine, jogging along the river a few times a week, replacing jazz with soft piano pieces, reading for half an hour before bed. These seemingly small things built a steadier foundation for quieter days. One evening, while cleaning my bookshelf, I found an old journal, hurried pages from my college years, when everything was messy but full of dreams. I laughed, then cried, not from pain, but from curiosity about my younger self, the one who believed everything could start over with a single intention. I placed my hand on the page and reminded myself, okay, let's begin again. I started posting short drafts on a small blog. No name, no expectations. At first, just a few readers. Some liked, some left short, kind comments. Those responses felt like tiny sparks in the dark, enough to keep me going. Knowing that my words could touch someone, even just one person, gave me a sense of connection that didn't have to be begged for. A few months later, Jake invited me to a small storytelling night at an artist cafe. I hesitated. Standing in front of a crowd had always been difficult, but this time felt different. I wasn't reading to prove anything. I was sharing a part of my journey. On that small stage, under the warm yellow light, I opened my notebook and read. When the final sentence ended, there was applause, not loud, but sincere. My heart settled in a peaceful way. I smiled, and for the first time in months, that smile wasn't burdened by fatigue. Life didn't erase the memories. Sometimes a song played, and I'd find myself drifting back to her, to the small table, to that faint trace of perfume. But those moments weren't collapses anymore. They were passing waves, coming and going, leaving behind a quieter shore I'd learned to keep clean. I learned to see them without stopping them, just let them flow through, and then small changes appeared in the relationships around me. I spent more time with old friends, unhurried conversations, long coffee breaks, walks in the park. I accepted an invitation to a photo exhibition, standing before moments frozen in frames. I realized I was also framing my memories in my own way, cherishing them, but no longer trapped by them. One late afternoon, as the sky dimmed, I received an unexpected email, an invitation to contribute to a local literary anthology. The sender was none other than the cafe owner from that storytelling night. They had read my blog posts and wanted a longer piece, one about the journey of starting over. A warm, nervous excitement spread through me. This was a chance to turn experience into a story that could reach others. I accepted the offer. Writing for that anthology wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about arranging the fragments, shaping them into something new, not perfect, but coherent, meaningful. I spent many evenings drafting and revising, letting each line reflect the honesty of what I'd lived through. During that time, Chloe no longer appeared in my life. Sometimes her name flickered through an old message or photo, but no calls, no texts. Maybe that was for the best. We were both finding ways to heal in our own directions. I wished for nothing else. When the manuscript was finished and accepted, I felt a new kind of relief, not because of success, but because I had dared to tell my story. Acknowledging through language that I was hurt, yet still standing, gave me a sense of completion. And on an autumn morning, as yellow leaves scattered across the pavement, I held the small newspaper where my piece had been published. Sitting outside a cafe, sipping coffee, I watched people pass by. I was no longer someone crawling out of ruins. I was someone rebuilding, slowly, carefully, but determinedly. Freedom doesn't arrive in an instant. It's born from countless small choices, repeated over time. I deleted her name from my phone, but not from my memory. I organized it, and when I lifted my head, the sky looked a little clearer than the day before. I took a deep breath and kept writing for myself and for those who might need the words. That evening, I sat by the window, the streetlights shining through the glass, stretching into long streaks across the table. Beside me was a new notebook, the first page still blank. I placed my hand on it, hesitated for a moment, then wrote the first line. I once lost everything, but now I understand. Sometimes losing is how we find ourselves again. No music, no smoke, only stillness, gentle as a breath after a storm. I realized that everything I used to fear, the emptiness, the silence, the memories no longer scared me. They were simply parts of the journey. There are things we can't go back to, but we can keep moving, softer, wiser. I don't know what the future holds, or whether someone is waiting for me out there. But for the first time, I don't need an answer right away. I closed the notebook and looked outside, where the rain had stopped. In the distance, a young couple walked beneath the golden streetlight. The girl looked up and smiled at the boy. That image warmed my heart, not because I missed anything, but because I knew love still existed, just in another chapter. I stood up, brewed another cup of coffee, the aroma spreading through the small room. Everything remained simple, yet peaceful. I no longer tried to fill the emptiness. I learned to live with it. Life, it turns out, isn't about running to where it doesn't hurt. It's about learning to smile, even with the scars. And in the soft evening light of Seattle that night, I knew I had truly begun again.